Well, hi, everyone who is just joining us. It is right at the top of the hour. As always, we're going to give it about 60 seconds to let everybody into the room, and we will be underway. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get underway. Good afternoon, everyone. It is so great to have you with us, as always, for the March edition. It's March already of the Early Efforts web series from the Hunt Institute. My name is Dan Worry. I am the Senior Director of Early Learning at the Institute. And for those of you who may be newcomers today, the Institute is an education policy support. It is located in Cary, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh, and we work with governors and state lawmakers and other senior state elected and administrative officials around the country. We cover the full education continuum from prenatal through workforce, but on this Early Effort series, we cover our particular portion of the work, which is the early childhood segment of the work. And I have to tell you, I've been looking forward to this conversation now for many, many months, because we welcome a terrific panel today to discuss a new movement in early childhood called Parent Nation, which is based on a brand new book, which will be released in April by Dr. Dana Suskind, who is joining us today. Those in the field often recognize that parents are their children's first and most important teachers. And in the new book, Parent Nation, Dr. Suskind takes this idea even further, argues that a more robust system of support for parents is needed during the most critical period of their children's development. It includes the latest science and stories from families. The book outlines how society can and should help families meet the developmental needs of young children. What's more, beyond this groundbreaking book, they are transforming it at the TMW Center at the University of Chicago into a movement to empower parents in ways that can be adopted and adapted by any family-serving organization in the country. So I'm looking forward to the chance for you to hear more about that today, to understand more about Parent Nation and how to unlock every child's potential. We are joined today by the two key leaders of this movement. They are Dr. Dana Suskind, who many of you know, the founder and co-director of the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health at the University of Chicago. Dr. Suskind is also a professor of surgery and pediatrics. We are also joined by Yolie Flores, who is the National Campaign Manager for Parent Nation at the TMW Center. It is so great to have both of you with us. Thanks for joining us. And Dana, I'm going to kick to you in just a minute, but before I do, just a few quick housekeeping items. Do know later in the hour that we will be sharing some of your questions. We'll have an opportunity for you to pose questions directly of our panel. If you'd like to contribute a question, please use the Q&A function that is down at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. I always love at the beginning of these seeing the chat fill up with your introductions of kind of your names and positions and hometowns. So please feel free to use the chat to interact with one another. But if you have a question specifically for the panel, use the Q&A so that those don't get lost in a busy chat. Also know that, as always, our session is closed captioned today. If you'd like to take advantage of that, you can find the closed captioning settings down also at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And finally, if you'd like to, you'll be able to find a recording of today's webinar on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So if you've missed out, have no fear, and you'll be able to track it down there. So with that, why don't we get things kicked off? And Dana, first, I'm just so excited to have you with us. I know we're just a couple of weeks out from the publication of the book. I saw earlier today that Publishers Weekly had given it a really very positive write-up, called it an incisive call to action, if I remember the phrasing correctly. So let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about the book. Some may know of your prior book, 30 Million Words. What inspired Parent Nation?
I am so thrilled to be here today. I cannot tell you how much I was looking forward to it. And I'm going to switch to the slides soon, but forgive me, Dan, because I'm going to have to correct you on one thing.
Okay.
This is not a movement we're starting. This is a movement that's been happening within the field. We're just trying to break it out of the echo chamber so that everybody knows and understands and moves forward. We are partnering with people who have been working on this for decades, including your leadership. So I really, that's the only correction that I'm going to give.
I will accept it gladly.
But I am just so thrilled to be here, and I know Yolie as well. So I'll kick it off and then turn it over to Yolie, who is making incredible things happen on the ground. My only wish is that we could obviously be here in person. But I want to thank you because you have been an incredible thought partner and connector, helping elevate the work of Parent Nation, and just been a friend for a very long time. The Hunt Institute, it speaks for itself. I mean, you all are so critical for inspiring and informing elected officials, leaders, policymakers on the area of education, and really helping ensure that all children succeed and all young people succeed. And that's really so aligned with this idea of building a parent nation, which is just simply aligning our values as a nation to allow all children to reach the promise of their promise. And importantly, that every parent and every caregiver, including teachers, are supported in this incredibly important endeavor. So I'm going to just start off and just give you a little bit of background of how I got here. As many of you all may or may not know, this is not my natural habitat. I feel most comfortable in the operating room. That's because my day job is as a cochlear implant surgeon. And in truth, as a physician who works just millimeters away from the brain, I have no room for error. When I step into that operating room, it's critical that I have my necessary tools at my disposal. And even more importantly, my A team. Otherwise, my job is impossible. And now, I know it may sound like a stretch, but I would argue that the challenges of successfully rearing a child is not so different. I'd even posit that it could be quite a bit more complicated. To raise a child into a happy, healthy adult capable of achieving their full potentials, which is all of our goals, you need adequate information, and you need an appropriate and safe environment, and you need backup. But far too many parents are not operating, or that is parenting, in an optimal environment. For far too many parents in our country, and I know you all know this well, and throughout the world, it's as if they're trying to function in the midst of a power outage, asked to achieve a critical goal without any necessary tools or backup, and it's just not sustainable. So you're probably saying, well, that's great, but why are you, as a surgeon, are you up here in the first place? So let me just take a step back to tell you a little bit how I got here, and which may give you insight as to how we can go forward. The truth is, I became a pediatric surgeon because I thought I could change lives, one child at a time. By implanting children born deaf, I give them access to sound, to hearing, and to spoken language. But early in my practice, I started noticing profound differences in the outcomes of my patients. Some children excelled developmentally, others not at all. Some learned to talk, others didn't. The ability to hear, it turned out, didn't always unlock their full potential to learn and thrive intellectually. It was an incredibly painful difference to see. And it was this that really compelled me to understand why it was, and more importantly, what I could do about it, so that I could best help all of my patients. And it began me on this crazy journey far outside the operating room into the world of social sciences. So as many of you all know, I was initially inspired by research that found a stark difference in the amount of language, the actual number of words that children were exposed to early in life. Researchers had calculated by the time a child turned 4 that there was roughly a difference of 30 million words between those who heard a lot of language and those who heard very little. As I learned more, I realized that what I was seeing amongst my deaf patients really mirrored the population at large, that in all children, the differences in early language exposure correlates to differences in later achievement. Some of my patients were getting that necessary input with language, others were not. But let me be clear, the research that inspired me wasn't perfect, far, far from it. But it was persuasive enough to pull me, a surgeon, from the operating room. It gave me a place to start. I often think of 30 million words study as really just the first sentence in what has become an extensive body of literature. A body of literature that includes cutting edge research that reveals the way in which language and interaction stimulates every part of a child's brain. In fact, quantity is far from the most important input. Really, quality and delivery are tremendously important. That nurturing back and forth interaction, the conversations with a loving caregiver are especially powerful and effective in building secure neuronal foundations that serve a child for a lifetime. This fundamental truth is what I came into in 2010 when I started the 30 Million Words Initiative, now the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health. My primary goal was to help ensure the healthy development in all children and to give every child the ability to reach his or her potential, both intellectually and emotionally. Brain science pointed the way. Everything we designed and did was based on the fact that nurturing talk and interaction between a caregiver and infant lay the foundation for brain development. Let me be clear, it is and always has been about the power of parents and caregivers. My team and I developed evidence-based programs and strategies to show parents the impact of talking to babies and young children. Those strategies became the theme of TMW: tune in, talk more, take turns, or what we call the 3 T's. It's probably going to be on my epitaph. We demonstrated that rich conversation is what is needed to unlock a child's potential, and that parents and caregivers, as well as other loving caretakers, hold the key in the early years. All adults, no matter their level of education, wealth, or work, can master the essentials for optimally building a child's brain. The idea, a straightforward approach to what is a very complex problem, was intuitively appealing and a great success. I think that many hoped that it would be a silver bullet. But of course, as we all know, there are no silver bullets. But with that being said, I was proud to share the 3 T's with many families through the TMW Center and through my first book, 30 Million Words, Building a Child's Brain. My colleagues and I at the center conducted numerous rigorous studies of our programs. We found that indeed our strategies worked and the science that supports them is solid. The programs we promote can and often do improve the lives of children. But in reality, as our research programs took us into more and more family homes and into their lives, I realized just how much was being asked of parents. Parents everywhere were being asked to operate without their A-team. Because our studies followed children from their first day of life, which is the greatest honor, into kindergarten, my team and I were getting to know many families up close and personal over time. And look, parents' enthusiasm was thrilling. They embraced those 3 T's with gusto, tuning into their children, talking more as they went about their daily lives, and encouraging their children by taking turns or having conversations. They wanted what all parents want, to help their children to get off to the best possible start. There was just one problem. The 3 T's only took parents so far. Real life would intrude again and again and again. There was Randy, who absolutely loved the fact that talking about his love of baseball could help his son learn math, but had to work 2 jobs and most days had less than 30 minutes with his kids. There was Sabrina, who gave up a well-paying job to care for her husband when he became sick, and whose family ended up in a homeless shelter for over 2 years, where she raised 2 children the youngest still a baby in a stressful and chaotic environment. Most searing of all was Michael and Kiana, whose life was upended when he was arrested for a crime that he did not commit and sat in jail for 5 years, awaiting a trial that exonerated him in a day and a half. Everywhere I looked, hurdles loomed in front of mothers and fathers. I realized with both sadness and resolve that our programs can share with parents the knowledge and the powerful skills that build their children's brains, but our programs do not substantially change the day-to-day lives of parents who participate. The larger reality of a family's circumstances, the work constraints, economic stressors, bad luck, or injustices they are subject to, all matter as much as those 3 T's for healthy brain development. They either allow for the brain-building power of parent talk to occur, or if they limit the opportunities for those 3 T's, they stifle it like a weed choking off a garden. And reflecting on what I was seeing, I began to look beyond my patients and the predominantly low-income families who are participating in the TMW programs to the entirety of the tens of millions of families in the United States who have children. And I saw, regardless of income, far too many parents are being sidelined to some degree by our country's unfamily-friendly policies. Look, this is not to minimize the Herculean struggles of poor families or to suggest that more affluent families face equivalent challenges. There is no equivalency. But nevertheless, it remains true that American society has abdicated its responsibility for all families. This reality, of course, became painfully apparent when COVID-19 left families reeling, millions forced to scrape by with no backup whatsoever. It still is today. Schools closed and our already inadequate childcare system verged on collapse. Parents were left on their own, anxious and exhausted. They were called on to manage every aspect of their child's lives. Even among them who didn't lose their jobs, millions of parents, mostly mothers, ended up quitting or cutting back. Doing it all was absolutely unsustainable. The pandemic was like a powerful earthquake with lingering aftershocks, really showing us just how shaky our nation's infrastructure of support for parents and therefore children really was and still is. The bottom line is we have made it difficult for all parents to raise children in our country and almost impossible for some. Look, I don't have to tell you the stats. You all are the policymakers here. I am not. I am the research scientist showing how the neuroscience really can inform what society does and to support children and families. And you all already know that we are the only one of 38 OECD countries not to mandate paid parental leave. I think many of us understand how difficult and challenging this is as a parent. But new research even shines a light on its impact on early brain development. New research from Natalie Brito and her colleagues at NYU just coming out this month, showing that those parents who had access to 3 months of paid parental leave their children experience more advanced neurologic development than those who did not. This has impact for parents and children. As you know, we spend less on early childcare and education than any other developed nation, which has resulted in a fragmented, not consistently high quality childcare system. This slide that many of you all know, you can look right at the bottom at who has the smallest investment. We don't even need to be at the very top. In the middle would be fine. This has resulted in over half of American families living in childcare deserts, and only 10% of existing programs designed with developmental science in mind, which means that 90% are sending their kids to varying degrees of quality childcare education. Given all of this, it's not surprising that the US differs from other countries on another important measure, something that we don't talk a whole lot about, but the measure of parental happiness. In most industrialized societies, parents often report lower levels of happiness than non-parents. It's hard to raise children, we all know that. but a study of 22 OECD countries by Jennifer Glass and her colleague showed that this parent happiness gap is largest. Can you guess? Just look at the bottom of the slide. Down at the very bottom is the United States. And those with higher, more generous family policies, well, they have a lower gap, and it makes sense. Well, put it simply, parents in this country lack support and they lack choices. No matter political or religious orientation, employment or educational status, too many parents seem to be struggling. And so as I reflected on all of this, I began writing my next book, even though I said I never would. This is my last one, I promise. I knew that the world didn't need another how-to book about what parents could do, one more thing to put on their shoulders. There are many excellent books out there, though I promise you my publisher would have loved it. Instead, I thought, you know what? What about a book that shows how the brain science can inform a society that works for parents, not against them, that could help shift the narrative and the burdens that so many parents carry? I named this book Parent Nation, and we can discuss why I called it that, but I should be clear that when I say parent, I really am referring to any loving caretaker, moms, dads, step-parents, adoptive parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, really anyone who loves a parent loves a child is a parent in my book. And as I was writing, I spoke to dozens of parents from all walks of life, and I was struck time and time again how much they had in common. Even parents who on their surface looked like they had nothing in common. She told me stories about their thoughts and concerns and fears that were incredibly similar to one another. Though their circumstances differed wildly, the fact that they were struggling to parent in the way that they wanted to, and in the way that they knew best for their children, that was a universal. The love of children is something that brings us together. I listened to a mother named Jade, who is deeply religious and believes that a mother's place is in the home. And she explained to me through tears that the lack of health insurance and inadequate family income sent her back to work to Starbucks after her children were born, in spite of her dreams of being a stay-at-home mom. I got to know Talia, who worked at the University of Chicago with me, a brilliant PhD who had 2 babies while earning her PhD in psychology, but gave up a promising postdoctoral position when it became untenable to manage the demands of the job and 2 children under 4. The economics for paying for childcare no longer seemed to make sense, and Talia felt, in her words, that she was failing in all parts of her life. Unlike Jade, she had hoped to work outside the home, but could not. We talk a lot about parental choice in this country. It's considered sacrosanct, as it should be. But what does choice mean when there are no options to be had? Jade didn't feel like she had a choice. Talia didn't feel like she had a choice, and neither do millions of parents around the country. And how did we get to this point that we're today, with a status quo that leaves parents struggling and unhappy, a status quo that is totally void of systemic approach to helping parents meet their children's needs? The explanation is complex and multifaceted, but one consistent theme runs throughout the choices we've made as a society. This mythic idea of American individualism. The notion that Americans have to be tough and independent prevails, and it perpetuates this going it alone as a virtuous ideal, even into parenthood. The results have been to convince parents that they should be able to shoulder the enormous responsibility of early childhood care and development and education on their own without any formal supports. As parents, we, especially moms, have internalized this propaganda, often burdened by guilt, while many are managing the delicate balancing act of trying to make it all work, yet feeling totally and wholly inadequate, asking why they're failing rather than asking why the system is failing them. The bottom line is that we have no expectations that society should and can play a role. Indeed, expecting help is often seen as a form of weakness, an admission of failure. So we suffer alone, but we also suffer collectively. When the ultimate intellectual development of a child is hampered, we all suffer. we all lose. But if the consequences of our broken system are to be shared collectively, so must be the solutions. And this is really the basis of this book. There are tens of millions of parents and caregivers, people who care about children and the future of our country. And though we differ in so many different ways, we are united by the experience of being parents and caregivers, by sleepless nights, by the depth of our love, by an overwhelming desire to do right by our children. As a physician who has cared for children for over 20 years, more years than I'd like to admit, I can attest to the fact that there is only one kind of parent, the kind of parent who wants to give what their children is right, what is rightfully their children's, the promise of their promise, even in the face of obscene and extreme obstacles. Despite all that we share, though, when I think about it, for some reason, parents haven't forged a collective identity. They don't see the commonality. Often they retreat, or we retreat to our respective corners, defined by some other characteristic or label than parent. But if parents of young children, were to come together, we'd have the potential to be the largest special interest group in the country. And I know at this very moment in time, it feels like a very tall order. We've become accustomed to feeling divided, but I think we've really gotten quite tired of feeling this way too. I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours of talking to parents from all different backgrounds, and never did I hear a parent criticizing another. Rather, I heard the desire for community, for a sense of camaraderie and support. No matter how different we may be, we can be allies. By lifting our voices as one, we can fight for our needs, for our children, for our future. And why do I so believe that we can have change, that change can come? We need to look no further than our nation's own recent past to see another group of formerly isolated individuals who came together to achieve important and lasting change. In the mid-20th century, Americans over 65 look very much like children today. They were the poorest, most underserved segment of the US population and the least politically active. In addition to having limited retirement and savings, older Americans face crippling healthcare and housing costs. According to a government study, 50% lived below the minimum standards of decency. And guess what? The AARP and the power of their voice changed all of that. Thanks to the AARP, over the last 50 years, there is no age group better served by society and government than the elderly. The poverty rate fell in Americans over 65 by 70%. They continue to make advances in healthcare prescription. They unite constituents across socioeconomic, political, racial, and ethnic divides by focusing on the rights that benefit everyone, and their success is legendary. And just as our nation's seniors were in desperate need and entirely deserving of support, so too are young children today and their parents. We need more, and we should demand more of society. But where do we start? How do we go forward? And this is where my research hat comes in. I believe that neuroscience can give us a roadmap. It tells us what to prioritize individually as parents, right? Talk and interaction, but it can also show us how to go forward societally. It can lay the coordinates that will lead us to healthy development for all children. That goal, laying the foundation for healthy development, should be our constant guide. Neuroscience tells us that learning begins not on the first day of school, but the first day of life. It tells us that children's earliest and most impactful brain architects are their parents and caregivers and early child care providers. It tells us that environment matters. Stable, calm environment fosters socio-emotional skills, executive function, whereas disruptive environment impedes it. And so, in that same way, we know that what parents need in order to follow the roadmap that neuroscience provides, What do they need? Loving mothers and fathers. We don't need PhDs or expensive gadgets to do an excellent job at supporting early development. They need access to basic but critical knowledge as to how to best foster neural connections. They need time. They need time with their children to put that knowledge into practice and nurture those connections. And they need high quality childcare to complement those efforts. They need to be able to provide their children stress-free homes. And critically, they need that form of support. We're not just talking policy, we're talking about employers, we need healthcare providers, communities. Really, it takes all of us to build this parent nation. And what should we strive to fight for? There are many things. Paid family and medical leave could be a really good start. A comprehensive, high-quality early childcare system, childcare allowance, a holistic approach to prenatal and pediatric care that includes supporting families, and a private sector that institutes family-friendly policies, these that are also good for the bottom line. This is a great return on investment. In other words, we need a society that puts children and families at the center. And as important as what we fight for, it's how we go forward as a united front of parents and allies working together who recognize themselves in one another and who refuse the very notion that a child can be someone else's. And as I mentioned, just as laying the foundation for healthy development means connecting all parts of the brain, laying the foundation for a parent nation means connecting all parts of society that rarely intersect. From the healthcare system, private industry, state, local, and federal government, it's critical that we all play a role. Which is why my team and I are so excited to be here talking to you today as we're launching a major coordinated campaign when the book is released to help spread these ideas far and wide and to get it out of our echo chamber so that people like us, like you all who have been working day in, day out on this can have everyone else understand it. It's my hope that this campaign, in conjunction with the book and with all of you all, will help shift the public will in favor of championing families and giving all children an opportunity to thrive. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my amazing colleague, Yolie Flores, who will share some of the work that we're doing that we would love nothing more than to partner with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana. And Yolie, as we're transitioning, and I know that you're going to bring up a couple of slides as well, I want to remind you that in just a minute after we talk a little bit with Yolie, that we're going to be taking questions from you. So please do use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen and go ahead and enter your questions so that we've got those there. I do want to address, though, quickly several questions that have popped up on a similar topic. This is a very important topic. Dana, you were good enough through some philanthropic support to make available to registrants today 500 copies of Parent Nation, which is coming out. Is it April 20?
April 26th. And I want to emphasize that any proceeds from the book come back to this larger effort. So no college tuitions are going to be paid for it. So get your friends far and wide to engage.
Well, there have been several questions about how do I know if I was one of the first 500 to register, and the answer to that is that the first 500 received an email with a link to go in and enter your name and mailing address so that the book, upon its release, can be shipped to you. So you would know if you were one of the first 500 because you would have received that email. But the good news is that we have a few copies that remain unclaimed, and also I think Dana is accumulating a waiting list and hope that maybe even additional copies might be able to be sent out. So I am going to drop here in just a moment into the chat a web link to the page where you can go if you were interested in receiving a copy of Parent Nation. Go ahead and click on that link and you enter your name and address. And around the time of the book's release, I'm presuming, because we're still a couple of weeks out, copies of the book will be mailed out directly. So I will do that. And Yolie, I'm going to hand things over to you to talk a little bit about what this movement's going to look like in practice.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And thank you to all of your remarks and your comments in the chat. I'm thrilled. Dana and I are thrilled that this is resonating for you, that this matters to you. And I was following some of the thread about when you saw the charts and about how sad it is that we live in this country, but our excitement about talking to you today is to say to you, it doesn't have to be this way. And we hope you will join us in this campaign to make that change. So as we know, books can be very powerful. They can move and inspire people. They help us imagine what's possible and can, of course, help inform and persuade us. But that's only if you read the book. So yes, we want you to read Parent Nation. But given the power of this message, we wanted to extend the ideas in the book through a national campaign, one that gets us out of our echo chamber and talking to a broader audience that can resonate to this mission, to this message, and join us in building a parent nation. Oh, my slides aren't moving. There we go. So in the Building a Parent Nation campaign, we have 3 elements, and I'm going to talk to you about 2 of them in particular. The first is the traditional book launch with book signings and book events. Hopefully, Dana will be on with Oprah and Reese Witherspoon. There's that big element of the campaign. We also have a social impact public messaging campaign, and we have an on-the-ground activation effort. So we're especially excited about number 2 and number 3. So I'm going to use my time to share highlights of both of these efforts. So first, the social impact campaign. We've partnered with an incredible creative agency to develop a public messaging campaign that illustrates what a parent nation looks like. The campaign will highlight real-life moments of support and solidarity that have captured the public's attention, and will illustrate that in a parent nation. These moments will be the norm. Because when it comes to raising children, as Dana said, it really does take a nation. It takes a parent nation. So we don't want to give too much away. The launch is in April, and you'll hear and see so much more. But we couldn't help but share a little preview. Now, many of you may remember this video. I'm not going to share it because we don't have the time, but you can see the image. You may remember the video that went viral a few years ago showing a father and an infant son sharing an adorable conversation. We're thrilled that that dad, DJ Pryor, has agreed to be part of our campaign. So we're going to leverage that video and many other videos and stories and make the case that in a parent nation, quality time with our babies is a given. Other campaign elements will highlight the pain points. You heard Dana talk about some. You see some of these here on the screen. We need to share what the reality is for parents today. But they will also illustrate what a parent nation looks like. So you're going to see lots of different messages. And here, I don't know if you can see that, it says we're building a nation where paternity leave is a given. That's just one of many messages, many examples. And finally, we will invite parents to share their truths, their stories through our social media call for submissions. So parents will have the chance to have their story retweeted and distributed in other ways that help build a parent nation. So those are some highlights of the air game. We're excited. We can't wait for you to see them and hear them. And I'll move on now to talk to you about the ground game, which is our community mobilization effort. So there are 3 elements to our ground game. For those of you who enjoy book clubs or book circles, the book discussion guide will have deepened conversations about the messages in the book. And then there's the action guide, which will offer a list of ideas and suggestions for how to get involved to build a parent nation. And finally, the parent villages will help activate parents in communities across the nation. A parent village is a small group of parents in community that have come together to foster community, to forge collective identity, and to be inspired to fight for change. Anyone wishing to bring together a parent village will have access to our materials, and I'll share them in a minute. These are materials that we have developed and that will give parents, caregivers, and allies a powerful experience and inspiration to help build a parent nation. And I'm thrilled that just over the last 2 months, because folks are starting to hear about this, we've had over 1,200 people reach out to us to learn more about parent villages. So what are they? So they're groups of parents or caregivers or allies in community coming together. We've developed a set of materials to engage in deep conversation, and I'll talk to you about what those look like. So essentially it's a curriculum. There are 4 90-minute sessions. It's a curriculum that is very interactive, very engaging. It's flexible and modular, which means that if you're already providing a parent leadership program, parent education program, you can pick and choose the sessions that most will fit and will complement what you may already be doing. It includes a kit for any person who wishes to host a parent village. It is and will be available in English and Spanish for in-person or virtual convenings. All of the content will be available on our website. You can have it, you can download it, and you can use it. We also invite you to co-brand it, add your organization's logo to the TMW Center logo, and really make it your own. So when folks are interested in hosting a village, they'll go to our website, parentnation.org, which is coming soon. There is a splash landing page, but the full website will be available in early April. But anyone who wants to host a parent village will have this deck. Everything on the deck is downloadable. There are links to all the activities, the resources, the scripted curriculum, and so on. This is just an image of what the mock-up looks like right now of each of the sessions in the scripted curriculum. This is now being designed, so it will look a little differently, but essentially this is all part of that toolkit. And just to briefly walk you through the 4 sessions, we do have deep 90-minute information sessions for anyone who wants to learn more and go deeper on this curriculum. And I'll share that with you all in the chat in a moment. But just to give you an idea of what each session is, every image that you see here represents a set of activities, cards, other exercises and engagement activities to bring the group together and to engage in deep conversation. So in session 1, it's all about fostering community, getting an idea about this big, bold vision for a parent nation, and really grounding the group in a set of principles that honor parents. In session 2, parents and caregivers and allies that participate will begin to think about their own set of needs, who currently meets those needs, and how those needs would be met in an ideal society. If you see the images there of the balance, that's called the Big Shift activity, and it is a mind-blowing activity. We've had now 5 groups across the country beta test this curriculum, and that activity is the one that begins to help parents understand that it doesn't have to be this way, and that we can actually create a different reality for ourselves. This is just an image of one of the many parent groups that tested our materials, and you could see the shift from, I know you don't know the details, but parents began to identify where their needs are mostly on them. And in an ideal society, those begin to get shifted so that's more of a shared responsibility. In session 3, by the time session 3 comes around, parents and allies and caregivers are starting to say, so what can we do about this? What do we do now? And in session 3, we talk about change makers. And we take parents through an experience to identify their own strengths and talents and interests, and that all of what we bring together can contribute to change making. They also go on a change maker speed dating game during session 3. And then finally, in session 4, we have a very exciting bingo game where parents are learning quite a bit about other bright spots of change makers, key concepts, historical efforts that begin to help parents see how we got to where we are today, but also all of the organizations that are fighting for change so that they can see that they're not alone, but that we need to come together for greater impact. By the time we get to the middle of session 4, parents are starting to work on their own Parent Village action plan, talking about what they want to do to create the society, to create this parent nation. And then they have their own pledge card where they fill out what they want to do to achieve that change. These are all the groups that have been beta testing the curriculum, who've given us incredible feedback. We're incorporating all of that feedback as we speak. And we're continuing these information sessions for those that want to go deeper into the curriculum. 2 final slides. One is, what can you do today? We know April is still several weeks away, but there are some things that we would love for you to do, help us build momentum around this campaign. So first, partner with us on the social impact campaign. We need you to help us get out of our echo chamber. We'd love for you to share Parent Nation and the Parent Villages with your networks. Sign up for the Parent Nation newsletter. Of course, follow Dana and Parent Nation on social media. And then coming soon to visit our website. And here are all the ways that you can follow us. I'll enter these into the chat. And yeah, would love to now entertain a conversation with you, Dan, and hear some reflections.
Fantastic, Yolie. Thank you so much. And how exciting all of this is. Thank you for laying that out. And I know we've got about 12 minutes left. We've got a lot of questions in the chat, so we'll play a speed round. The 3 of us sort of running through these. Dana, the first question I wanted to ask, I think listening today, I can't help but reflect on sort of where we are as a country. In some ways, what we're describing here feels very close, right? This is like actively a conversation in Congress in a lot of ways. And yet it feels also over the past couple of months like that conversation has lost some momentum. I know President Biden's State of the State or State of the Nation address is this evening. And we'll be addressing some of these issues if the advanced materials are accurate. What's your sense of what do we need at this point to bring this? I feel like we're closer than ever, but still needing to push it over the edge. What's your thought on how we get there?
Yeah, I think, as simplistic as it sounds, I think an elevation of expectations of parents, of all of us, that society can and should play a role. I mean, what we're seeing, with, the lack of BBB is something that has happened over and over again in terms of history. I mean, the one fun part of writing this type of book is you learn history in the deepest way. And in children and family issues, I mean, back to, the 19 teens with the Shepherd-Towner Act and the mother's pension, where we said, okay, we're going to invest in children and families. We do it, it does well, and then it's cut off, is something that happens over and over again. And this time, we couldn't even get things passed. And I really did look deeply at the AARP and the Gray Lobby and sort of that historical aspect. And number one, you have to actually believe that you deserve this type of support. Not that it's like, special, but this is fundamentally that we are building the next generation, and that societal supports doesn't take away parental rights. If anything, it gives parental rights. So one of the hopes with the work that we're doing amongst a lot is to get out of the echo chamber, that we start expecting this type of support. I mean, I could go longer, but we have too many questions.
Well, let me jump right into another. So you referenced sort of the need to unite all of the different sectors and coordinate these efforts for parents across education and the workforce and local services and the business community. But this question noting that that can't happen necessarily overnight. So question is, what would you recommend is the most important piece as like a first step in the movement?
That is a really unfair thing. I told you we need to elevate expectations and everything else will come along. I mean, obviously, we all know the different policy supports that would make a tremendous difference, even at the baseline. I think that, believe it or not, I think the private sector can play a huge role as well in building this parent nation. Number one, the economy is being negatively affected because we're not investing in children and families. I mean, look at the Great Resignation. This early childhood, this is not just an early childhood issue. This is a foundational aspect to our country. So I think there's the role of business and investing in the right way, the role of policy. I don't have enough time to tell you only one thing, and I refuse to. So
fair enough. Had a great question. I'm going to combine a couple of questions because they're similar. So one question in the chat was from someone who is working as a parent educator, asking how they might be able to tap into these resources for like group activities. And then a similar question from Sonia in the chat asking whether these groups can be facilitated virtually, that many parents obviously still concerned about COVID.
You want me to take that, Dana? So I just put in the chat a link for anyone who is interested in learning more and hosting a parent village. There are some information sessions that we are holding. We will probably add more because the demand has been pretty great. And there are sessions that are for those that want to deliver the parent village in Spanish, in person, or in Spanish virtually, English in person, or English virtually. And so we just had our first session yesterday, I think, which was incredibly well attended and lots of good feedback. That one was for the English in person. We will add more sessions, but the virtual one, so to answer your question, there are now ways that we can bring parents together, do all of the activities, engage them in the conversation by using some very cool tools. Some of you may know some of these tools, Jamboard and others, that allow parents to engage in the activities and have just as powerful of a conversation online. 3 of the 5 beta test groups tested the curriculum virtually. So we know that it can work. We've gotten some good feedback to make it even easier, to simplify it for parents. And no, you do not have to be a skilled facilitator to host a parent village. The curriculum is written so that there's a bit of hand-holding if this is something you've never done. It's scripted. Of course, you can adapt it. You can make it your own, bring your own voice into it. We even encourage groups to change the way you begin. If you're a tribal nation, maybe you want to begin your welcome with prayer and chanting, or any other way that feels right for your community. So it's adaptable, it's flexible, and yes, for in-person and virtual.
Yolie, and Elizabeth is asking a related question in the chat, asking about sort of the process of getting involved in doing this. She's asking, are you offering training to facilitators to get started, or are they just using Parent Nation, sort of jumping in using the toolkit? And are there costs involved?
So anything that we develop for the parent villages can be downloaded for free. So that means all the ideas, the concepts, the games. If you have a printer, you can print everything and download it or take it to a printer. But we've also been asked to make a kit available that already has everything printed on it. So we're exploring that as a way to give other people an option if they don't want to deal with the printing and downloading. Obviously for that, there might be a cost just to cover the cost of printing, et cetera. But we wanted the ideas, the concepts, the activities to be completely available at no cost.
I just wanted to add,
go ahead, Dana.
I mean, in full transparency, we are doing with limited resources. I mean, Yolie's greatest hope would be that, that we could just send it out to everyone and that we would have formal trainings. We're doing what we can with what we have. So, if the funding gods want to fund it, please rain down on Yolie.
We will have some videos to guide people through how to deliver. We'll have some FAQs. We're going to do as much as we can with the resources. And until I'm completely out of 24 hours in my day, happy to talk to anybody to help you through it.
That's fantastic. Nancy's got an interesting question in the chat, Dana. She's noting that people over 65, are in a unique place in life. In some cases, they have the time and the resources to advocate for themselves, whereas parents who of young children in particular have so many responsibilities, especially as they are working, and so just their time and their energy their resources are so much more limited. So she's asking, how does Parent Nation address this, or might we address this?
No, that's a really great question. She's talking about the revolving door issue, right? I mean, we're parents for X period of time, and it doesn't last forever. I think what's important is that this is not necessarily only parents of young children who are, fighting for the needs of parents of young children. I mean, I was so impressed and blown away from some of the beta test sessions that Yolie was running. They were, half were grandparents, or half had children older than 0 to 5. Because let's face it, 0 to 5, there's a reason that there's a lot going on. So absolutely, I don't think that this is just for parents of young children. That's why I'm excited that we're talking to you all. And I think it's also important to understand that the AARP model, most people in this country don't view themselves as activists, right? And so they're having a larger voice to help speak for the universal needs of families, I think, is what the AARP did for the elderly. I mean, many people join it not necessarily for the advocacy, but the travel discounts. But this is not what we're doing at this point. But I think that this is a really important issue that she brings up, because it may be the reason that it's taken so, that we haven't gotten there at this point. Because how else can we not have paid family leave? How is it that we're in this moment in time? And it was, after writing this book, it's the only thing that I could come up with. I'm like, well, this could be a potential answer.
Absolutely. Well, I hate it. It always happens this way, that the hour flies by, and we're right up against the top of the hour. Dana and Yolie, what a treat to have you with us and to celebrate. I'm excited to say this might be the first time that we've scooped Oprah to a guest. So if we can get you here first, then that's a good sign for us. Dana, tell us one more time when the book will be released, and remind us of the title and where people can find it.
Parent Nation comes out April 26th. If you go to parentnation.org, we have like a splash landing site, but it's going to be much more robust. Would love to hear from you. Partner, get the word out. This is much more than a book. This is elevating all of our voices, and reach out. You all are the ones doing the work. We want to partner and elevate everyone. This is not a product. This is a moment in time that time has come. So thank you all.
Well, Dr. Dana Suskind and Yolie Flores of the TMW Center at the University of Chicago. What a treat to have you with us, and that you are welcome anytime. Want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to spend this time with us, and encourage you to join us for some upcoming sessions. On March 29th, we will be talking about the teacher education pipeline and the role of higher education in supporting the early childhood workforce. Be joined by Rian Alvin, who is the CEO of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, Mary Harrell, who is leading the higher education efforts there at NACCE as well, along with Megan McCann from Education Commission of the States, and Dr. Reggie Williams of the South Carolina State University. It'll be a great conversation, 3 p.m. on Tuesday, March 29th, and we will be back for early efforts on April 5th. We'll be talking about creating robust mixed delivery pre-K systems as Congress debates expansion of pre-kindergarten around the nation. We'll be talking with state leaders who are doing that in the public sector and in the private sector, creating those great mixed delivery systems. So we hope you can join us for one or both of those upcoming sessions. Thanks again for being with us, and Dana and Yolie, again, thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone. We'll see you next time.